Welcome to Download Qi. This is Frank Blaney, and I'm here to discuss where do autoimmune disorders come from and can Qigong help? Of course, I need to kind of get this disclaimer out. I'm not a medical professional. I don't make any profession to be a healer of any sort. Obviously not a medical doctor. My background is I teach Qigong and Tai Chi for health enhancement, and also I have studied traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, which are both holistic healing approaches, as well as herbalism. And so that's my only background in looking at this topic, but I kind of want to put that out there. So before we get into it, I wanted to ask you to consider to subscribe. We're going to be doing more topics about autoimmune disorders and how Qigong can help in the very near future. So if you're interested in that topic, subscribe and hit the notification button so you know when they drop. We will be doing these every Wednesday, and that way you can get and stay up to date on all the information. So this topic is not just a general one for me or an academic one for me, it's a very personal one for me. I shared in my video last week about 3 easy immune boosting tricks and tips that you can do, about an incident that happened when I had a lot of people who had an autoimmune disorder attend one of my weekly classes back in Los Angeles. They were sufferers of Scleroderma, which is an extremely painful autoimmune disorder where there's a stiffening of the skin and a lot of pain associated with movement. And there I mentioned that after they had come about 4 to 5 weeks after I'd done a presentation to their medical support group and later to their medical support conference, many of these students experienced both movement that they hadn't been able to experience before doing the Qigong, as well as feeling coming back into parts of their body they haven't felt. So I've had a lot of students come through in Download Qi's training that have been victims, I would say, of autoimmune disorders, and knowing about their journey, hearing about it, has been very impactful to me. Also, on a very personal level, my wife was diagnosed just a few years ago with rheumatoid arthritis, and so I've been traveling along with her on this journey of her own way to deal with the symptoms and the healing of that, and I'll discuss a little bit of that in a moment. And also, one of my dear friends and one of the authors of my publishing company, Maria Ann Laver, wrote a book about her journey. The name of the book is MS, which stands for Multiple Sclerosis, You Don't Own Me, One Woman's Approach to Overcoming Multiple Sclerosis Naturally, by Maria Ann Laver. And as I was helping her edit this book and go through her manuscript, I learned a lot about her own personal journey as the MS developed in her system, how she was an extremely active and successful woman at the top of her industry in sales in the UK, and how this disease just knocked her down in so many ways, and the frustrations that she went through in trying to get it adequately diagnosed and understand what was going on, and being told the same pat answers that we don't really know what causes this, there's not much we can do, and that high level of frustration that victims of autoimmune disorders and diseases have to go through. So it's a very personal topic to me. This question, where do autoimmune diseases come from, really has no answer if you look to Western science. They don't know. They simply don't have enough clinical studies to indicate, and there's a few hints that they have as to what may be the causes, and I'm going to discuss those in a moment. But I do want to say that my background in studying more holistic forms of health enhancement, like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, and herbalism, I'm probably going to have a little bit different approach or understanding of what the root causes of some of these diseases are. So for a moment, let's take a second to discuss this topic in detail. I do want to say I'm going to show at the end of the video one simple, easy Qigong movement that you can do to de-stress, and we'll talk a little bit about the impact that has on autoimmune disorders and diseases. And so stay tuned for that, but I kind of want to break down the subject because we as Western people, we're always looking for a quick fix. And the reality is when you go to holistic medical systems, global ones, Ayurveda comes from India, it's connected with yoga. Traditional Chinese medicine obviously is rooted in China, and it approaches things from the standpoint of Qi, which is bioelectric energy, and that's where acupuncture, the herbs, and Qigong all work together to try and affect the flow of this bioelectric energy so there's no blockages. So they all have different theories, but what they do is they look holistically at the situation and attempt to address the root cause versus the symptoms approach that much of Western medicine does, in particular with the pharmaceuticals. So I'm not knocking Western medicine. The diagnostics are great. We've got some very encouraging experiences in working with Western doctors with my wife's rheumatoid arthritis, and some really discouraging ones, to be honest with you. I'll share one incident before we get into it. The second rheumatologist that we visited, this was about a year and a half into my wife's struggle with rheumatoid arthritis. We sat there, and we're explaining the symptoms. He was examining her, doing a physical examination, and every question that my wife Colette asked, the pat answer is, well, there's no clinical studies that indicate whatever it is, right? No clinical studies indicate, there's no clinical proof, blah, blah, blah. Clinical, 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 clinical. Like, people are suffering these diseases now. So we've got to wait 20 years before Western science amasses a large body of evidence to prove what might be working today. And I'm not knocking the paradigm of doing clinical research and clinical studies. I've got a master's degree. I took a research and analysis class. I know how that works. What I'm saying is that when people are suffering right now, they don't want to hear that. They want to hear at least something that's going to give them a ray of hope or something to work with in regards to practical behavior they can implement into their life to make their condition better, right? So that was a frustrating experience. The rheumatologist that we met with following that incident, it was like 8 months later, I think. She was a Japanese physician. She seemed much more open to natural alternative medicines. She actually encouraged some of the dietary changes that my wife was including to address her symptoms. But still, there was really nothing they could do other than give some prescriptions, and a lot of those prescriptions had really radical effects, if side effects on them. So I guess I'm sounding frustrated because I am frustrated, and I don't have an autoimmune disease. I can just imagine that those of you who are watching this feel like crying. I mean, Maria in her book talks about that, how you just feel like you're lost and you're alone, that there's no hope for you. A lot of times, especially when you're going into a Western doctor, they're gonna say, oh, well, our studies don't show anything. So I guess what I'm saying is that Western medicine is not particularly equipped to deal with a comprehensive disease like the autoimmune diseases are. As you know, some of the autoimmune diseases attack one specific part of the body. With multiple sclerosis, it attacks the central nervous system. Rheumatoid arthritis attacks the joints. Stage 1 diabetes attacks the pancreas. And then there's other autoimmune diseases that attack the entire body, like lupus. Western science kind of thinks that there might be some genetic predisposition towards some of these autoimmune diseases. It seems that might be the case with multiple sclerosis and lupus, which tend to appear more often in African American communities and Latino communities. But the interesting thing is that when you look globally at where autoimmune diseases appear, they seem to be in higher concentration among westernized or industrialized nations. So you're looking at the United States and Europe. And so as Asia becomes more industrialized and starts to develop more behavioral patterns of eating Western dietary foods, their autoimmune diseases tend to go up. And the long and short of it is that in answer to the question, where do autoimmune diseases come from? We don't know. That's what Western medical science will say, we don't know. There's three key areas that they seem to look at that may be causing that. One is, like I mentioned already, it seems to be more prevalent in the industrialized world, and it's probably related to the diet in some way, shape, or form. Although again, go see your rheumatologist, go see your endocrinologist. They're going to tell you, well, there's no clinical studies to indicate because there's just a lack of data. Another theory that they have is environmental toxins, which again would correspond to the industrialized nations. And again, as Asia and even certain parts of Africa are becoming more industrialized, you're starting to see a notching up of the number of the cases of autoimmune diseases. The third factor that is indicated, and this is probably from what I've seen to be the most promising root cause of it, is actually stress and emotional trauma. And so stress across the board is an indicator that the symptoms of autoimmune diseases are going to become aggravated. But in many cases, people who've gone through the journey of discovering that they have an autoimmune disease would look back and say, well, it was this particular trigger. It was the death in the family. It was a car accident. It was financial, or whatever it was. A lot of times people who are suffering with this will tie the inciting incident back to a stress or a traumatic source, emotionally traumatic source. One thing that's very curious to me is that it's much more prevalent among women than men. Think about that for a minute. Now, if it is being caused by toxins, environmental toxins, there's an equal amount of men or women living in those areas. And if it's only caused by stress, well, men and women go through a lot of similar stress. Why is it women that are being affected more? In particular with the most common of the autoimmune diseases. There's 81 different autoimmune diseases. About half of those are considered very rare, and then the rest of the ones that we hear all the time. And among those more common autoimmune diseases, there tends to be about a 2-to-1 ratio of women to men that have it. And I personally have a theory about that, and it's only a theory. I worked for many years in trauma work with victims of sexual assault, victims of domestic violence and domestic abuse, and violence victims in general. And my guess is, based upon that work, is that there's probably a lot of repressed trauma that women have in our society that maybe men don't have to the degree that would cause maybe some of these diseases to come up later. There is some information out there that suggests that some of this may be rooted in emotional trauma that people experienced in their childhood, but it tends to not come to fruition in an autoimmune disease until about the ages of 40 to 50. That's a generalization, sometimes mid-30s, mid-40s. So it is a mystery, but one thing that we can do is do what we can, right? People who have autoimmune diseases, you can explore all these theories and all that, and it's important indeed to find what the root cause is. But in the meantime, we need to take hold of solutions. And that's where the Qigong comes in. So the whole question of this video is, where do autoimmune diseases come from? And will Qigong help? There's much more evidence indicating yes, affirmative on the latter part. Will Qigong help? Because there is an intimate connection between stress and autoimmune disease. And the reason is that it reduces the stress. And when you reduce the stress, when you increase the deep diaphragmatic breathing, that allows the capillaries to open up and take the nutrients, take the oxygen to the inflamed areas, and begin the body's own natural healing process. So it's not magic, it's not woo-woo, it's not some sort of weird supernatural thing. All we're doing when we do Qigong is allowing the body to get into the proper conditions that allow it to begin its natural self-healing abilities. And one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of Qigong versus the other mind-body exercises is that it's very easy and very mild. With yoga, there is gentle yoga, but there tends to be a little bit more athleticism involved with yoga, which can be very difficult if you've got a painful arthritic condition or something like Scleroderma, where it's just difficult to move. And so Qigong is a mild movement, a moving meditation that can help address some of the symptoms of these autoimmune diseases. So I'm going to go ahead and transition into demonstrating the actual movement I want to share. It's from my book, Qigong, The Quick and Easy Startup Guide. It comes from the Mood Enhancement set. And let's get to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and get to the Qigong movement. This is called Eagle's Flight, and this is a standalone Qigong exercise that you can do. I'm demonstrating it standing up, but it can be done just as well sitting down if you've got mobility or balance issues. There's a description of this and some pictures in my book. This comes from the Mood Enhancement set. But the great thing about this particular Qigong exercise is that it releases a lot of dopamine, the happy hormone that reduces our stress and chills us out and helps make us happy. So that is very beneficial for dealing with any autoimmune disease. So we begin in the beginning Qigong position. My feet are slightly wider than shoulder width apart. My hands are a little bit away from my body. Everything's nice and soft. My shoulders are soft. My spine is nice and straight. My head is straight, like it's suspended by a string. And everything is soft. Make sure you soften your abdominal muscles, your shoulders, and everything. So we're going to begin on the inhale, and my wings are going to float up. And on the exhale, they'll float down. Inhale, exhale. If you feel comfortable doing so and it doesn't mess up your balance, you can close your eyes. Just imagine that you're a birdie floating through the air. Again, when your wings lift up, you're inhaling. And when your wings descend, you're exhaling. You want to have your wing flapping pattern being in sync with your breathing. So I may be breathing slower than you, in which case, if you're breathing faster, your wings will be moving faster. Don't try and imitate what I'm doing. Follow your own breathing pattern with this. So if your breathing is quicker than mine, your wing flapping is going to be faster than mine. But if you can slow your breathing down a bit, that's best. The rule on Qigong, the general rule, is slower the better. So I'm deep diaphragmatically breathing in, nice deep exhale out. So you can do this from anywhere from, let's say, 10 to 15 repetitions. You probably don't want to do many more than that. Your shoulders will get stiff. We'll do a few more. Nice and easy. Nice exhale. Let that dopamine release. Inhale. Exhale. Okay. So now on the close, we're going to bring our feet together. I'm going to inhale, 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 exhale as I pass my hands in front of my body. Then I'm going to inhale 3 times towards my lower abdomen. Inhale. Exhale as I reach. Inhale. Now that's called sealing the chi. And because we breathed in deep and diaphragmatically and energized our bioelectric energy, we want to make sure that we bring that into our core so that our bodies can do what they're designed to do, which is to begin to heal and begin to relax. So thank you for joining me. Please do subscribe because we'll be doing one each week, and you'll be getting more information on how to progress on your journey towards wholeness and healing.